I'm going to start this video off with a bit of a thought experiment. The first 3x3 Rubik's Cube was originally invented in 1974, and it was then released in 1980. 1 year after that, they made the Rubik's Revenge, which was basically a 4x4, and it was released in 1981. And then 2 years after that, they created the Professor Cube, which was basically just a 5x5, and it was released in 1983. And so with that information, when do you think the first 6x6 and 7x7 was first produced? Well, if you thought it was something like 1985 or 1987, you'd actually be completely wrong. It was made in 2008. And if you thought that it was made by Rubik's, you'd also be wrong because it was made by another company called V-Cube. Now, V-Cube was originally founded in Greece by a man named Panagiotis Verdes, and unlike most cubing companies, it didn't actually start with a 3x3. Its first cubes were its 6x6 and 7x7. And while the cubing community was really small at the time, as you can imagine, it was a really big deal for those who did cube. At that point in time, we had gone basically 25 years stuck at the 5x5, and while there were small renditions of 7x7s and 6x6s here and there, nobody was actually able to mass produce them until, as I said, 2008. Now that being said though, 16 years later, and VQ as a company has become basically obscure. If you had started cubing maybe like 10 years ago, like I did, it was definitely a big name when you first started cubing. However, now you almost never hear about it anymore. And if you started cubing in the last like 4 to 3 years, you probably don't even know what V-Cube is. So in this video, I'm going to go through V-Cube's entire history from its launch to how it was able to find so much initial success and then its eventual downfall. I'm also going to give some personal theories that I have on the downfall of V-Cube that I feel like are pretty well backed. And in order to do that, I have this video split up into 16 very YouTube friendly parts. And so let's start with part number 1, the marketing. Now, right when V-Cube launched, the marketing was really good. They basically call themselves the 21st century cube, and they would really prioritize things like premium quality, a futuristic looking design, innovation, you really name it. And honestly, in the beginning of V-Cube's existence, they really lived up to this name. Their marketing was also really helped by sponsoring really notable cubers at the time on social media, notably people like RedKB and Me, Myself, and Pi. If you started cubing recently, you probably have no idea who these people are, but if you started cubing a long time ago, like I did, you probably watched these people as a kid and listened to every single word that he said. Honestly, I feel like ever since V-Cube, we haven't really been able to see that many cubing companies market themselves the way that they did, because I feel like when it comes to every single speed cubing brand nowadays, they basically just try making the best cubes possible, and they really rely on their product quality in order to really gain themselves a substantial audience. Whereas with V-Cube, they really try differentiating themselves, identifying what makes them different from the typical Rubik's brand cube, and they really wanted to create an avenue of their own. Now, because they really preached their high quality and their, futuristic design, their prices, for better or for worse, matched their marketing, which gets me on to part 2, the cost. The V-Cube 6 and 7 was originally priced at $38 and $45 respectively, which I know doesn't sound like that much right now, but at the time it was a lot. Like, while we might have $90 3x3s at this current point in time, back in 2008, 3x3s didn't really get more expensive than like 15 bucks. Like, for example, if you're trying to buy like the newest Daiyenshin cube or something like that, it was probably going to cost you $10. If you're trying to buy a Rubik's brand 3x3, it was going to be from $8 to $12, and a 5x5 was going to be like $20 max. So with something like a 6x6, you would probably expect it to be around $25 to $30, but no, it was $38, and the 7x7 was much more than that. And so while a lot of the community thought that the cube was way too expensive, there were some that did justify the price by saying that it was the first of its kind, saying that it was innovative, that it was super high quality, and also because of one other reason, which was part number 3, the packaging. V-Cube's packaging was designed to really help justify the price and also help continue to sell the premium and futuristic look. And so if you take a look at the packaging, it's really well designed, it's very premium, and you feel like you're getting a heightened product. On top of that, the cube included things like cube stands, other accessories, which really helped with its premium feel. And overall at the time, it was really cool. Now I know since then, cube packaging has gotten a lot better. I mean, for example, if you take a look at like this Go cube, for example, it comes in this nice, almost like tech-esque box. A lot of other cubes come with like magnetic boxes, some have like little display cases. Overall, cube packaging has gotten really good. But if you take a look at 2008 cube packaging, it was really just a little paper box. And so low-key V-Cube having, like the clear plastic display case and just making sure that the box was really high quality, it was really revolutionary, and it was something that wasn't really seen in the cubing community at the time. Something else that wasn't really seen at the time was part number 4, the look. So the first V-Cube 6 and 7 had a pillowed look, which basically meant that instead of being perfectly cubic, it would actually be a little bit more spherical and pillowed, hence the pillowed name. And while V-Cube tried to preach that this was due to, them wanting to have an innovative design and have a futuristic look, it honestly was more so due to design constraints. Once again, they were making a product that basically didn't exist at that point, and so while they would ideally want to have a cube shape, they did have to cut some corners in order to make it exist, no pun intended. Some viewers did not like this pillow design at all. They felt like it was really hard to speed solve and that it was really hard to properly grip the puzzle. With that being said though, retrospectively, the pillowed look was honestly really helpful for VCube's brand. The main reason being that it helped differentiate the puzzle from its competitors. Think about it, if you're a non-cuber for example, and all you're used to is, like a 3x3 Rubik's Cube, if you saw VCube 7 all of a sudden, where it had, its pillowed look and 7 layers, it would look different enough to the point that you wouldn't automatically associate it as a Rubik's Cube. Yes, you would probably call it a Rubik's Cube 7x7, but once you hear that as a V-Cube, you're much more likely to call it a V-Cube 7 rather than just a 7x7 Rubik's Cube. And so while the pillow design didn't really help V-Cube integrate with the cubing community, it did really help differentiate itself when it comes to non-cubers. Now we're going to talk about part 5, which is the turning. Back in 2008, cubes honestly sucked. So for 4x4 and 5x5, you'd do something like Ishin puzzles, which were almost as bad as Rubik's 3x3s, except they would maybe turn a little bit faster, but they would lock up a ton. And as for 3x3s, there were maybe some better options, but the best that you would get is like a Daenshin 3x3 or the original Dian Taiyan. In fact, cubes were so bad that a lot of people would just use the original Rubik's 3x3 and just mod it a lot and do like 1,000 solves so that it would be somewhat usable. And so when the VCube 6 and 7 first came out, people honestly didn't really have that many issues with the turning quality. Now, one thing just to note, which is that these VCube 7 did turn a lot better than the VCube 6, which makes sense because 6x6s are typically harder to design. But yeah, people were generally fine with the turning. On top of that, there were really no other 6x6 and 7x7s at that point in time, so people didn't really have a point of reference anyways. And so while it would lock up a lot and it would pop every now and then, the turning was smooth enough to the point where if you do like 1,000 solves on it and you mod it a lot so that the corner cutting could be better, and then you finally, put some lubricant inside, it would be okay, it would be usable. And so with that, just like the 2x2 to 5x5, people started speed solving this puzzle, which leads to part number 6, new WCA events. The introduction of the VCube 6 and 7 literally led to the introduction of 6x6 and 7x7 as a WCA event. And as you can imagine, all the first world records that were initially set were all done by VCubes because there was no other cubes at the time. Honestly, as someone who prefers big cubes over small cubes, I am very, very appreciative of VCube 6 and 7 for introducing these events into the WCA. Sure, someone else was probably going to do it if VCube didn't do it themselves, but they're still the first ones, and so you gotta give them that. Part number 7, new products. Now obviously at this point in time, VCube was seeing a lot of success, and so it became very natural for them to want to expand the product line. So far they only had the 6x6 and 7x7, and so why not make something like a 5x5, a 4x4, a 3x3? Over the next several years, these puzzles would continue to come out. The problem was though, was that with 6x6 and 7x7, they were the first of its kind, and so there was no competition, whereas something like the VCube 3 was made around the same time as the Dian Guhong version 1, which was actually a really solid cube at that point in time. And so when the VCube 3 first came out, people would try it and realize that it's not as good as the Dian Guhong V3, and it very quickly became pretty irrelevant in the greater, speed cubing landscape. For non-cubers though, who didn't really know about brands like Shengshao and Dian, the VCube 3, 4, and 5 were seen as really good options to start off with cubing, because while the puzzle was a little bit more expensive, it looked really cool, and compared to the Rubik's 3x3 that was available at the time, it turned a lot better. And so from the time span between 2012 to around 2016, a lot of non-cubers would buy a V-Cube as their first Rubik's Cube. Part number 8, my experience. Before we move on too much, I want to talk about my personal experience with the V-Cubes. And so the first cube I ever gotten that was a V-Cube was the V-Cube 3. It was actually gifted to me as a birthday present around 2016. And I think it was just from like a friend's mom who knew I liked cubing, but they didn't really know what cubes were good at the time, and so they just went with a V-Cube instead. And honestly, I was really excited to get it. At that point in time, I already had like a Moyu Weilong and, all the pretty solid cubes at the point, but the V-Cube just felt a little bit different, even though I felt like it wasn't going to turn that well. I knew that it had a really cool design, I thought the packaging was really cool, and so when I ended up unboxing and tried turning it, I was disappointed. Like, I knew the cube didn't turn that well, but I didn't expect it to turn the way that it did. Yes, it was somewhat smooth, but it was by no means even close to a speed cube. It felt stiff, it felt a little bit clunky, and when I tried doing speed solves on it, I would be like 10 seconds slower than I would be on my Moyu Weilong. I did really enjoy how the cube felt in my hands though, because it was pillowed, for example, the cube felt a little bit smaller than normal cubic 3x3s that were the same size. On top of that, I thought the stickers looked really nice. I really liked how well it felt like the plastic was made. Overall, it just felt like a very premium product, but once again, I was never going to use this cube for speed solving. Now, when it comes to the VCube 6 and 7, I never actually owned one, but when I would go to competition and try other people's cubes, I was honestly a little bit shocked by how bad they were. To be fair, at that point in time, there was already cubes like the Shengshao 6x6 and 7x7 that were a lot better, and so when I was trying other people's VCube 6 and 7s, it just felt really, really clunky, and it honestly felt like it was going to explode at any point in time. So yeah, that's just my personal experience with VCubes. If you are like an old school cuber VTuber and you've owned one before as well, make sure to share your experience in the comments, just because, yeah, these cubes, I think when they first came out, they were pretty solid, but after a while, it was pretty evident that they did not turn very well. With that being said though, let's move on to part number 9, which is VCube's success. So at this point in time, over 3 million VCubes have been sold all across the world, which is pretty unprecedented when it comes to, you know, twisty puzzle products. The only other cubing brands that have reached this level of success has been obviously Rubik's, as well as GAN and Moyu. But with that being said though, GAN and Moyu has been existing for way longer and has way more products than something like VCube. And so how exactly was VCube able to achieve this level of success? Well, in my opinion, it was because of their emphasis on B2B. Now, if you don't know what B2B is, it's basically just business that's done between one business and another business. So let's say that something like Apple is trying to sell iPhones at Target, they would need some type of business agreement where Target is able to pay Apple a certain amount to have the iPhones there in the first place and, you know, eventually sell it to consumers. And so under that same vein, VCube knew that in order to expand their business, they would have to form a better relationship with distributors. And it wouldn't just be with SpeakCube retailers like SpeakCubeShop.com, it would be with very generalized retailers. If you went to a Barnes & Noble like 10 years ago, you would see an entire tray filled with VCubes that have the 3x3 all the way up to the 8x8. This is honestly something that other cubing retailers have failed to do to this very day. For example, like when's the last time you saw a GAN or Moyu cube at a Target? You never have. And it's because they have absolutely no relationship with big retailers, besides things like, once again, SpeakCubeShop. And so to sum it up, VCube, because of their B2B relations, were able to expose themselves to non-cubers and cubers alike, and because of their really superior marketing, they were able to sell millions and millions of products. This lasted for several years until Part 10, the downfall. So over the last couple of years, VCube has really declined as a company, and I really think that this could be summed up with 3 main factors. So the first factor is competition. In 2011, Xingqiao made their very first Super 6 and Semi 7s, and when comparing the two brands, the main consensus was, let's say you have a Xingqiao Super 6 and a VCube 6. Out of the box, the Xingqiao 6 is going to be a lot better. However, you've probably been solving this VCube 6 for like 2 years at that point, and so you have thousands and thousands of solves. So because of that, at this current point in time, your VCube 6 is going to be better than that Xingqiao 6x6. However, if you just do like 1,000 solves in the Xingqiao 6, it will be a lot better than the VCube 6. I say all that to basically explain that while the Xingqiao 6x6 and Semi 7 were better puzzles, VCube was still somewhat relevant in the race. Now that all changed though when Moyu made their first 6x6 and Semi 7s. Now there's that same comparison, except it was Moyu and Xingqiao. So out of the box, the Moyu 6x6 and Semi 7 wouldn't be as good as a, you know, broken in and well lubed and well set up Xingqiao 6x6 and Semi 7. However, if you just do like 1,000 solves in this Moyu puzzle, it will be a lot better than this Xingqiao puzzle. And that's the point that the VCube 6 and 7 became completely irrelevant to speedtubers. Next, factor number 2, which is controversy. Yep, that's right. There was some weird cubing controversy that happened during the time of the VCube. So basically, when Dian first created their Dian Guhong version 1, which by the way was a full year before the VCube 3, VCube tried making the argument that Dian was knocking off their design, saying that their original 3x3 patent that was, to be fair, created before the Dian Guhong version 1 came out, it was being copied, and if you take a look at the designs, you could kind of see it. But honestly, this was like the silliest lawsuit of all time, just because, yes, while you can make an argument that the Guhong was somewhat similar to VCube's patent, all of you guys are still copying the Rubik's Cube in the first place. It's almost as if like I invented like a basket that also is a computer, like it has a screen on the basket or something like that, and then someone else made the exact same thing. They made a basket with a screen on it, but then they have a different design, and then someone else also made a basket with a screen on it, but then they copied the handle of the first person that copied my design. At the end of the day, none of the companies that came after are original in the first place, and so what's the point of saying that we're more original than you when there's no originality at all? What a lot of people started speculating was that VCube was threatened by the Guhong version 1 because it was so much better than the VCube 3, and so because of that, they tried to remove it out of the competition so that more people would buy their VCube 3. Honestly, that could or could not be true. In my opinion, I just feel like they felt as if they actually did get copied because of their patent, but at the end of the day, I feel like none of these cubes are even original in the first place, and so what's the point? And the third factor for VCube's decline was no new products. The last time that VCube created a new puzzle that wasn't just a sticker mod was all the way back in 2012. That's 12 years now. There's some cubers that weren't even born back then. And I feel like it's because VCube sees their cubes as finished products. Like, you know, they already made a 3x3, and so what's the point of making another one? They already have one. What's the point of making a new Semi 7? They already have one. But obviously, that's a bit of a flawed mindset, It's like as if Apple created their first iPhone back in 2007, and then after that, they just never updated it ever again because, oh, we already made a phone, what's the point of making another one? No, it does not work like that. But despite VCube being a multi-million-dollar company, they once again have still not bothered to update their original 6x6 and 7x7 made all the way back in 2008. And this mindset has really damaged both their cuber and non-cuber businesses. So obviously when it comes to the cubing business, no cuber nowadays would have any reason to buy VCube 6 or 7 because we have cubes like the MGC or the Moyu Outfit, and these cubes are just so much better in comparison and also cheaper, to the point that for cubers, unless you're trying to just like mess around, there's no reason to buy VCube anymore. And while non-cubers are going to be a little bit different in that they don't really know about brands like Moyu and they don't really know about how old the VCube actually is, think about it from a retailer's point of view. Let's use Barnes & Noble as an example again. Back in 2014, VCubes were only like 6 years old, and so it made sense to have these products into your store. They seem new, they seem different, and it made sense to have these products alongside other twisty puzzles and other board games that they might have. But now 10 years later, what are the chances that you're going to continue selling that same product now that it's 16 years old? It really doesn't make any sense from a retailer point of view, and so because of that, they're going to take that off from their shelves, they're going to get rid of that business deal that they had with VCube, and now non-cubers are not going to see it, which means that they're never going to buy it. And so now the only people that were going to buy VCubes are non-cubers that are going to be able to find it at random stores who maybe have never sold their products yet, or maybe have still kept on holding on to the relationship with VCube. It honestly is quite catastrophic, and on a business level, it really doesn't make any sense how VCube hasn't been able to make new products and just dedicate more people towards engineering. But with that being said, let's move on to part 11, which is my theory. So this is what I believe happened to VCube internally, and this is completely based on speculation, so take it with several grains of salt. It's probably not true. I basically theorize that VCube was able to gain enough capital and revenue to the point where its founders were happy with where the business was and really didn't feel the need to grow it anymore. Mainly because while they don't want to close their business, they also don't want to take on the risk of expansion in fear that they might fail and become bankrupt. And so let me explain. If you look at VCube's YouTube channel and Instagram, you can see that they're still posting a little bit of things here and there, which basically can be done by like one marketing person. All you need is like one marketer to just make a couple videos, do a couple posts every now and then. In fact, they're probably hiring this person on a contract role who isn't even full-time, and so that is going to be a really minimal cost every single year. On top of that, when it comes to things like selling cubes on their website as well as their retail presence, those are all things that just need to be maintained, meaning that the cost will be very minimal and will likely never be able to surpass its revenues. And then engineering and design, they basically halted this entire business, obviously because they haven't released any new cubes in the last 10 years. Once again, this is completely speculation, but this is low-key what I would do if I was running VCube as a business. Like, yeah, I would want to make sure that I maintain it enough, I make sure that I could just sell whatever my existing stock is, but the parts of the business that are going to be most risky and most expensive, such as designing new puzzles and making new relationships with new businesses, those are the parts I'm going to completely disengage from. And so I'm making a little bit of incremental revenue every now and then, I have no risk of losing money, and I can basically just sit on and invest like my fortune and retire. Yeah, that's basically what I'd do if I was running VCube. Part number 12, VCube's legacy. VCube has had a very lasting impact on the twisty puzzle community, obviously because they created the first ever 6x6 and 7x7, and as someone who absolutely loves 6x6, I am very grateful that because of them, the cubes are now in the WCA. They also got a lot of non-cubers into cubing as well. You know, since Rubik's, there hasn't really been another cubing brand that has been able to penetrate the non-cuber market like VCube has, and you know, people who might have bought a VCube 3 as their first puzzle might learn how to solve it, might have learned how to get a little bit faster at it, and then became cubers after that. Additionally, VCube was able to change the way that cubing brands market themselves. Having that marketing scheme of being innovative and 21st century was something that cube brands really never did at the time but are now doing. And on top of that, being able to have such good packaging on their puzzles and having it feel premium and making sure the unboxing experience is one that feels good, that's something that cube brands also never did at the time but are now taking on. And so honestly, VCube has had a really incredible legacy that has been long lasting and has really impacted a lot of people and has really been able to impact the cube community quite positively. With that though came their eventual downfall, and to sum it all up, I feel like the best way you could contextualize VCube as a company is missed potential. In 2008, they genuinely were extremely innovative and created puzzles that were really high quality, obviously because there was no speed cubes in those specific categories. They were also able to capture a very general audience, and I feel as though if they continued expanding, they would just continue to improve on this, and if they continued making new puzzles, they would be able to improve their product line more and more and more, to the point that maybe there could have been a very non-cube or popular puzzle that was also really well turning. But unfortunately, that wasn't able to happen. VCube was eventually phased out, and this is probably the first time you've heard about VCube in the last couple of years. So that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed learning about VCube's history. That's all for this one, and I'll see you guys in the next one.